Okay, so what we're now going to do is define our first object, apply a property to this object, and then we're going to also define a method. Now what we're doing here is we're sort of creeping into best practice territory, because previously what we've been doing is creating global variables. So we've been doing things like var name equals Alex, and then comma separating this with things like age equals 24. These variables then, as we discussed before, are in the window namespace. So if we look at window.name, we get things like Alex back, and window.age, we get things like 24 back. Now we already saw previously that this can cause problems when you have external resources brought into a page, and you get naming conflicts. So you have, if someone's called something a variable similar to yours and they're also using globals, then you will get naming conflicts and things will be overwritten. So what we actually do is, when we create an object, in the last video we created var app equals, and then we created an object literal like this, which will store all of our app properties, say variables and methods, functions. So in this case, this is the only variable that we need, and we can refer to everything via this app object that we create. So what we're going to do in this video is something very basic, but fundamentally explains sort of what I've just talked about, and also we're going to create our first property and our first method, which is going to interact with the app itself. So it's going to refer to itself, because what we don't want to do is we don't want to be always referring within app to app.something, and for that we use the this keyword. So if you are from an object-oriented background, you will understand this. If it's your first time programming, this might take a little while to sink in. So what we're going to do is, I've brought this down. Now this looks a bit odd because we saw before that we just had the sort of object literal like this. What we can do is we can define properties and methods, remember methods are functions, within our app by saying app dot and then something. So I could say app.version equals 1.0. Now what that's done is it's assigned this property to this app object and stored this value within it. So what we can now do is, over in the console, if we type app, you can see that we've got object with version 1 in there. So in this case, this is fine. We can do this. However, what we can also do is we can store them within here directly. So we can just open this up within this block and say version colon and then the value that we expect to have in there. And we can comma separate these as we have done before. So I'm going to say name brilliant app or something like that. So now we've got two properties within this object. So when I go ahead and refresh and type app, you can see that we've got that, and we can access them using the dot notation, and we can say what's the app version 1, what's the app name, it's brilliant app. So we can do this as well, and we stored this all within a global or a global variable called app. So window.app is our object, but we can't just, for example, call version. Version is not defined. We need to call it using our app namespace, if you like, or our global object. So this is the correct way to do things. We don't have global variables floating around, and it's not good practice to have this. So now we've contained everything within app, how do we actually make use of creating functionality all within this object? Because it's best practice to create everything, all of your functionality within this app as well. Let's say we wanted to introduce a function on our page which returned us the app's name. Now there's a few ways to define functions in JavaScript. We can say, for example, function, and then we can give function name. So we can say get version, and then we can return app.version. Now this is well, it's not incorrect. It will work, and you know, it's not going to cause too much problem. But if there's another variable called get version, we've now created a global here. So what we can now do is say get version. In fact, let's just output the contents of our app. We can say get version like this, and that will return us the function code. And if we call it, that will return us 1. It takes the value from here. Now the problem here is that we've now created a global function, which we don't want to do. We want to create everything within our app. So how do we do this? Well, let's go ahead and get rid of that global function, and let's just go ahead and comma separate down here. And again, we could do this outside if we wanted. We could say app dot get version. Now what are we going to do here, because this looks like a property, and it is actually a property, but by assigning it a value of a function, it will become a method. So I could say get version and say 1. That's now property of our app thing, of our app object. But if I assign this a function, and this looks slightly different to the way we might do it normally, bear in mind that in JavaScript we can say var get version equals function, and we could say return app.version. Now this is still incorrect, but this is just another way to define a function, so this will still work if you see get version like this, and it's window.getVersion still exists as a global. So we don't want to do this, although it works. We still have the potential for naming conflicts. So what do we want to do? Well, we don't want to do this. This is the incorrect way, so we'll go ahead and get rid of this. We comma separate down here, and we create a new property, which will now become method, because we're going to assign a function to it like this. Now inside of here, we could say, for example, return, which just returns a value from the function and gives it us out. We could say app.version. Now let's take a look at what happens here. Let's go into our browser. Let's see app first of all. So we can see here that we've now got a function within here. We've got an object version 1 name brilliant app get version. Now if we expand this, you can see that we've got this get version method here, and if we expand that again, we can see all of the properties, or if you like, relating, and our methods relating to our object. And you can see that this has in fact inherited the object prototype, so a function is an object too, so it's good to know. But what we can do instead of doing that is app.getVersion. So there's the code, we know that that's the code. Let's go ahead and call it with our brackets, and we get 1 back. Now this is absolutely fine, but it would be better to, rather than refer to this as app, let's just say we change this to, I don't know, cool app, and we went ahead and refreshed, and we said cool app dot get version. The code is still there, but it's returning app.version. So when I go ahead and call this, it says app is not defined. So if, for example, I needed to change the object name, we've got a problem here. We may need to go back, and we may need to refactor all of our code and change all of our code to suit the new name. Instead of doing this, we can call the this keyword, and that just refers to the object as a whole. So when we say this.version, it refers to app. So it's basically the equivalent of saying app.version. So when I go ahead and refresh now, and I type in app, we get the same code, everything's there. But if I call get version, that will return this.version instead. So let's go ahead and call the function, and we get 1 back like that. So that's basically how we create a very simple object. We've also talked a little bit about how we should namespace things under a single object, just to make things a little bit easier for ourselves, and so we don't get any naming conflicts. So now all of our functionality is contained within app. We can go ahead and actually create all of our functionality under here using properties and methods. And things do get a little bit more advanced as well in terms of object-oriented JavaScript, but as long as you understand this basic functionality of objects and what objects are, and the fact that all or almost everything in JavaScript is an object, then you can go a little bit further and start working in a sort of object-oriented nature. Particularly when you look at other code, you'll see it makes more sense when you look at it, and it doesn't confuse with things like the this keyword and the fact that everything's defined under a single namespace.